Love, commitment, marriage, these are the things we associate with a bright future. But sometimes, the path to that future takes a dark, unexpected turn. What if the person you trust most, the one you've promised to spend your life with, is secretly plotting your demise? This is a story of betrayal, a calculated murder, and a secret that lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed. A secret that would shatter lives and expose the chilling truth behind a seemingly perfect romance. Alice Avery-Burkett was a young woman with dreams. A bright future stretched before her, filled with promise and the anticipation of building a life with the man she loved. Carrollton, Texas, 2020. It was a typical Texas town, a place where people knew their neighbors and life moved at a comfortable pace. Alice was happy, in love, and planning her wedding to Andrew Beard. Their relationship seemed like a fairy tale. He was charming, successful, and swept her off her feet. But behind the smiles, something was amiss, something no one could have foreseen, something deadly. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Andrew Beard was everything Alice thought she wanted. He was attentive, showering her with compliments and gifts. He had a successful business, a beautiful home, and a seemingly endless supply of charm. Alice felt like she had finally found her Prince Charming. He whisked her away on romantic getaways, made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. It was a fairy tale come true, or so it seemed. But beneath the surface, a darker current was beginning to flow, a subtle shift in the dynamic, a hint of possessiveness disguised as affection, a creeping sense of unease that Alice couldn't quite place her finger on. The charm began to wear thin. The compliments turned into criticisms. Andrew started to nitpick at everything Alice did, from her choice of clothes to her friends. He'd belittle her aspirations, telling her she wasn't good enough, that she needed him to guide her. He became increasingly controlling, demanding to know where she was at all times, who she was talking to. He isolated her from her support system, subtly poisoning her relationships with friends and family. The once loving and generous man was slowly revealing his true self. And then, Holly Elkins entered the picture. She was everything Alice wasn't: older, seemingly more sophisticated, and quick to ingratiate herself with Andrew and even Alice's young daughter Willow. She appeared kind and friendly, offering Alice support and understanding. But Holly had her own agenda, an agenda that would have devastating consequences. Amidst the growing tension, Alice discovered she was pregnant. This should have been a joyous occasion, but it only complicated matters further. Andrew's reaction was calculated. Initially, he seemed supportive, even enthusiastic. But this was a facade. The pregnancy became another tool in his arsenal. He saw it as a way to exert even more control over Alice's life. The relationship deteriorated further, and Alice, realizing she was in a toxic situation, finally decided to leave. But Andrew wasn't about to let her go. He was determined to have Willow, and he would stop at nothing to get her. He painted Alice as an unfit mother, claiming she was irresponsible and unstable. He used his financial resources to wage a bitter custody battle, dragging Alice through the courts and making her life a living hell. But was this the whole truth? Was Alice truly the unfit mother Andrew portrayed her to be? Or was there something else at play? Something far more sinister. October 2nd, 2020. A crisp autumn morning in Carrollton, Texas. Alice arrived at work just like any other day. She parked her car, completely unaware that she was about to become the victim of a brutal and senseless crime. What happened next is almost too horrifying to comprehend. Alice was attacked as she sat in her car. A figure approached her vehicle. A gunshot rang out, shattering the morning calm. The bullet pierced the windshield, striking Alice in the head. But Alice was not killed instantly. Wounded and terrified, she managed to open the car door and scream for help. Her attacker, who had momentarily retreated, saw her attempt to escape. He returned to the car, this time armed with a hunting knife. What followed was a frenzied attack. Alice was stabbed repeatedly, 44 times according to the autopsy report. Eyewitnesses described a scene of unimaginable violence. The sheer ferocity of the attack left investigators stunned. It was clear this was not a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated. This was personal. The investigation began immediately. Detectives meticulously combed the crime scene, searching for any clue, any piece of evidence that could shed light on who committed this heinous act. Suspicion immediately fell on Andrew Beard. He was, after all, her fiancé, and they had a history of conflict. He seemed the obvious suspect. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the volatile relationship with Alice. But the truth, as it so often does, was far more complex. As detectives delved deeper into Alice's life, they uncovered a series of unsettling events. Alice had confided in friends and family that she felt like she was being watched. She suspected someone was following her, monitoring her phone calls, even tampering with her car. And then, a bizarre twist. Alice was seemingly caught with drugs in her car. This discovery threw the investigation into chaos. Was Alice involved in something illegal? Was this a motive for the murder? Or was it a calculated attempt to frame her, to discredit her, to silence her? The police followed this lead, but something didn't add up. There was no evidence linking Alice to the drugs. No fingerprints, no DNA. It was as if they had been planted. Alice's paranoia, her feeling of being watched, took on a new and chilling significance. She felt like someone was always one step ahead of her, manipulating the situation, pulling the strings from the shadows. But who? And why? The answer was far closer than anyone could have imagined. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives began to scrutinize Andrew Beard's connections. They discovered a link between him and Frank Marrow, the man who had reported Alice for possessing drugs. It wasn't a coincidence. The drug planting wasn't just a bizarre twist, it was a calculated setup, orchestrated by Andrew himself. He had paid Marrow to plant the drugs in Alice's car, hoping to frame her and discredit her in the ongoing custody battle. But this wasn't the only secret Andrew was hiding. Detectives uncovered evidence of sophisticated surveillance technology. Spyware had been installed on Alice's phone, intercepting her calls, text messages, and even tracking her movements. A tracking device was also found on her car. The chilling truth was revealed. Alice was being stalked, her every move monitored, her privacy violated. Someone was watching her, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. But who was behind this elaborate scheme? The evidence pointed to Andrew, but the truth was even more shocking. The real mastermind wasn't Andrew, but his new fiancée, Holly Elkins. Holly, with her seemingly kind and friendly demeanor, had been secretly manipulating Andrew, pulling the strings from the shadows. Her motives were complex, rooted in a deep-seated desire and a twisted sense of entitlement. Holly was unable to have children herself. This inability fueled a burning obsession with Andrew's daughter, Willow. She envisioned Willow as part of her perfect family with Andrew, but there was one major obstacle: Willow's mother, Alice. Holly saw Alice as a threat, an impediment to her vision of domestic bliss, and she was determined to eliminate her. Holly was a master manipulator. She played on Andrew's insecurities, his feelings of inadequacy. She convinced him that Alice was an unfit mother, that Willow would be better off without her. She whispered in his ear, feeding his paranoia, fueling his anger. She convinced him that Alice had to be eliminated, that it was the only way for them to have their perfect family. And Andrew, blinded by his desire for Willow and his infatuation with Holly, became her willing pawn. Holly meticulously planned every detail of the murder. She rented a vehicle under a false name, ensuring that the getaway would be untraceable. She purchased the weapon, the hunting knife that would be used to carry out her deadly plan. She even devised a disguise for Andrew, ensuring that he would not be easily recognized by witnesses. She turned her fiancé into a killer. On the morning of October 2nd, she set her plan into motion. She sent Andrew to carry out the brutal act, while she waited, knowing that her twisted vision was about to become a reality. She believed she had thought of everything. She believed she had committed the perfect crime. But she was wrong. She had overlooked one crucial detail. The truth always has a way of surfacing, and the truth about Holly Elkins was about to be exposed. As the investigation intensified, the pressure began to mount on both Andrew and Holly. Detectives meticulously pieced together the evidence, creating a comprehensive timeline of events. The tracking device placed Andrew's car near the crime scene at the estimated time of the murder. But it wasn't just the location. The data also showed the car making a brief stop shortly after the attack, a stop that would later prove to be crucial. The spyware on Alice's phone provided an even more damning picture. It revealed a series of chilling communications between Andrew and Holly, text messages and phone calls filled with coded language and veiled threats against Alice. They discussed their plans, their frustrations with Alice, and their growing desperation to gain custody of Willow. They even talked about the details of the attack, the weapon, the disguise, the getaway. And then there was the DNA. A small but significant trace of Andrew's DNA was found on the fake beard, a critical piece of physical evidence that directly linked him to the crime. The walls were closing in. Andrew Beard was brought in for questioning. Initially, he maintained his innocence, but as the detectives presented the evidence, his composure began to crumble. He stammered, he sweated, he offered weak alibis that quickly fell apart under scrutiny. Finally, faced with the overwhelming weight of the evidence, Andrew Beard confessed. He admitted to the murder, describing in detail how he had attacked Alice, how he had shot her and then stabbed her repeatedly. He claimed he had acted under duress, that Holly had manipulated him, coerced him into committing the horrific act. He painted himself as a victim, a pawn in Holly's twisted game. But the investigators knew that Andrew wasn't entirely truthful. He was trying to minimize his own role in the crime, to portray himself as less culpable than Holly. Meanwhile, Holly Elkins, aware that the police were closing in, took a calculated risk. She voluntarily went to the police station. She offered a tearful defense of Andrew, claiming she was shocked and devastated by the accusations against him. She portrayed herself as a loving and supportive fiancé, completely unaware of his dark side. She even provided an alibi for him, claiming they were together at the time of the murder. Her alibi, however, was flimsy and full of inconsistencies. Detectives quickly discovered that she was lying. She had concocted the alibi in an attempt to protect herself, to distance herself from the crime. But her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. The investigators knew that Holly was not just an innocent bystander. She was the mastermind behind the murder, the driving force behind the tragedy. And they were determined to expose her lies and bring her to justice. Holly Elkins's trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness the downfall of the woman who had orchestrated such a heinous crime. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, presenting a mountain of evidence that painted a damning portrait of Holly's manipulative and calculating nature. They called witnesses who testified about Holly's obsession with Willow, her jealousy of Alice, and her relentless pursuit of Andrew. They presented the intercepted phone calls and text messages, revealing Holly's chilling conversations with Andrew, her detailed planning of the murder, and her cold-blooded determination to eliminate Alice. They showed how she had purchased the hunting knife, the very weapon used in the attack. They traced the rental car back to her, the vehicle used by Andrew to carry out the murder. And they presented the DNA evidence, the irrefutable link between Andrew's DNA and the fake beard found at the crime scene, proving Holly's direct involvement in the disguise plot. The prosecution argued that Holly was the driving force behind the murder, that she had manipulated Andrew, playing on his insecurities and his desire for Willow, turning him into her instrument of death. The defense, on the other hand, tried to portray Holly as a victim herself, claiming she was just as shocked and horrified by the murder as everyone else. They argued that she had no knowledge of Andrew's plans, that she was simply a loving fiancé who had been deceived by a monster. But the evidence against Holly was overwhelming. Her own words, her own actions, condemned her. Her carefully constructed facade of innocence crumbled under the weight of the truth. The jury deliberated for several hours, carefully considering all the evidence presented. They weighed the testimony, examined the exhibits, and scrutinized the arguments of both sides. And finally, they reached a verdict: guilty. Holly Elkins was found guilty on all counts: incitement, orchestrating the crime, complicity in the offense, and tampering with evidence. Justice had finally been served. The woman who had so carefully plotted and planned the murder was now facing the consequences of her actions. Her twisted vision of a perfect family had shattered, leaving behind a trail of devastation and loss. The courtroom drama, the legal proceedings, the verdicts, these are all part of the story, but they don't tell the whole story. Because at the heart of this tragedy, there was a real person, a vibrant young woman whose life was brutally cut short. Her name was Alice Avery-Burkett. Alice was more than just a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was a young woman with dreams and aspirations. She loved to laugh. She loved to dance. She loved spending time with her family. She was a kind and compassionate person, always willing to lend a helping hand. She had a bright future ahead of her, a future that was stolen from her in a moment of senseless violence. Her murder left a gaping hole in the lives of those who loved her. Her parents, her sister, her friends, they were all devastated by her loss. They struggled to come to terms with the horrific way she died, the senselessness of it all. They were haunted by the memories of her laughter, her smile, her infectious energy. They would never again hear her voice, never again share a meal with her, never again celebrate a milestone with her. Alice's murder was not just a crime. It was a theft. It stole her future, her potential, her presence from the world. It left behind a legacy of pain and sorrow that will never fully heal. But it also left behind a legacy of love, a reminder of the vibrant and beautiful person that Alice Avery-Burkett was. And it's important that we remember her, not just as a victim, but as the vibrant, loving woman she was. Andrew Beard and Holly Elkins were brought to justice for their heinous crime. They were tried, convicted, and sentenced for the murder of Alice Avery-Burkett. Andrew Beard, the man who had once professed his love for Alice, was sentenced to 43 years in prison. He will not be eligible for parole for at least 30 years. Holly Elkins, the manipulative mastermind behind the murder, was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Their sentences reflect the severity of their crimes, the calculated nature of their actions, and the devastating impact on Alice's family and friends. They will spend the rest of their lives behind bars, paying the price for their horrific deeds. Their story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal relationships and the devastating consequences of manipulation, control, and unchecked ambition. This case raises complex and disturbing questions about the nature of human relationships, the dynamics of power and control, and the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. It highlights the insidious nature of manipulation, how one person can subtly influence and control another, leading them down a path of destruction. It shows how easily trust can be betrayed, how love can turn into hate, and how a seemingly perfect relationship can mask a dark and dangerous reality. The story of Alice Avery-Burkett is a tragedy. It's a story of loss, betrayal, and the ultimate price of violence. But it's also a story that serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder to be vigilant, to recognize the signs of manipulation and abuse, and to seek help when needed. It's a story that should prompt us to reflect on our own relationships, to be honest with ourselves and with others, and to prioritize respect, trust, and open communication. Because sometimes, the greatest danger comes not from strangers lurking in the shadows, but from those we believe we know and love. What are your thoughts on this case? Did you see the signs of Holly's manipulation? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let's discuss the complexities of this case and the lessons we can learn from it. And if you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Your support helps us continue to create content that explores the complexities of true crime and the human condition. Thank you for watching.